pretend to be a hard drive. So they steal the commands from hard drives, they apply them to memory, and it's responsible for all of the management, the block calls, all of the wear leveling management, ECC, how to delete stuff, everything. And this is why it's so hard to recover from them, because all of the control is here, and then that's wear leveled over all of the disks. So you'll actually have a situation where, and I'll show it in a second, where all of the chips are all used together. So in hard drives, we're used to dealing with these things, the system area, all of the tables, all the things we can read. We can manipulate them, try to recover from the drive. Those are hard to get to in solid state at all. In solid state, those tables are also on those chips. And when a chip is damaged, you may lose part of it. And that's why you can't reinitialize or get back to where it was. So also, the other thing that's happened is solid state manufacturers have decided all this legacy stuff we've done in hard drives, you guys don't know what you're doing. We're electronics people. We're specialists. We don't need what you've got. So they just decided we don't need any of that legacy stuff. So they just built a whole new set of criteria and content. They didn't learn from any of the messages, any of the things that we already had from things that had errors and things like that. So also there is some other things in traditional hard drives that have to do with how we talk to blocks. Like for instance, these are called utility block addresses. Utility block addresses are basically, I'm going to use a group of sectors so that I can write to the data in a block. And so programmers will only talk to that. So when you say a bad block list is 3 sectors on one drive and it's 10 sectors on another drive, that is basically what they're doing for utility block addressing. And that's one of the things that we call modules. So in firmware, when you're dealing with firmware on a hard drive, you're going to be dealing with modules basically at that point in time. There'll be tables that will have modules in them. In solid state, what happens is they take that entire area. All of the chips are kind of treated as one. And they can break up where those tables are, and they store them and wear level them over all of the disk, the whole disk. So there are certain things, like for instance the LBA to PBA conversion table, that will tell you where your data was. When you said I wanted sector 525, where is it now? There's a table that maintains that. If you can't get to that table, then your data is jumbled up because it sits everywhere. It's fragmented all over the disk. So when you just read it raw, you don't get anything that makes sense. You only get blocks at a time that are contiguous. And those are the only ones that make sense. Well,
way more fragmented.
Yeah, way more fragmented, yeah. Way more fragmented than that.
SSDs will move data just on their own. Like they'll just switch sectors because they decide to go to there's no logical order.
Think about if you're doing an acquisition, like especially from
like a bit
forensic standpoint, you might image the drive, you might hash it, image it, and hash it again, and everything matches. But you know, if it has to be done a couple more times or double checked by somebody during those subsequent power on operations, even if it's behind a write blocker, some countdown algorithm might trip to be like, okay, these operating system files that never change
Doesn't do anything.
have been sitting here for a long time. Let's swap those out now.
The right block is external. This would be at the
I'll tell you in a second.
They have a control, so now those get swapped out with an area that has been written to a lot of times, and that the high frequency data gets moved over to where the operating system had been sitting since the install, and now it's occupied there. But because of the way the pages and blocks are laid out, it's not going to be an exact one-to-one mapping of how they fall anymore, and now the hash changes. Even though you haven't done anything, you haven't written to it, it was behind the write blockers.
And that's to answer your question, how do you do forensics on these things? That's the problem. That's what we're getting to as a huge problem, because as Josh said, the stuff changes and your hash changes with it. So anytime a change happens during garbage collection routines, that's what changed, and that's why I got into it. That first picture I showed where it was all 0, one day I had this hash. A week later I had a completely different hash.
Well, that's because this is all this is done at the drive level, at the internal level. That the blocker is going to be on the outside level. Well,
no, I mean it's moving logical data around.
Come in, but internally it's moving itself.
Right, it's moving all the stuff around, and a write blocker does nothing except stop you from making changes to it.
On the outside.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything else.
So, I mean, if the hash changes now, any expert or knowledgeable person on the other side is going to try to call for that data to be thrown out or be invalidated or,
Right.
you know,
It's
it's possibly spoiled.
So,
But you have to be educated enough so that hopefully, because that's going to be a semi-regular occurrence, if you know enough about the fact that that can happen on its own, you might be able to defend it, but you're going to have a lot of selling to do, and even if they buy it, you're going to have to then have enough documentation in regards to your forensic methods and the chain of custody and put it all together, because that's the only way that you're even going to have a chance of not having that evidence thrown out.
well,
Theoretically.
there is kind of one other thing that you can do in advance if you know that this is the kind of problem that you're starting to deal with, and that's to hash all the files. So it doesn't help you with unallocated space, because unallocated space is where most of the changes happen. They happen in slack space and they happen in unallocated space because it's deleting the content you marked deleted. But if you hash your files, so if during the process you not just hashed your drive, you ran through a report and you hashed all your files and saved that, as long as the files you aren't trying to prove existed were in unallocated and deleted space, then, and they are existing files, so like in a child porn case, that this file exists, you could actually defend against that in the case by saying, look at all these other files that are on the drive, that didn't change, so yes, something else changed, but changed in unallocated space. We're not going to have an argument about unallocated space, we accept that. Then you can show that on the day that you've actually captured this, that all the files were the same.
Good point.
So that is one thing to do. Unallocated space is a whole nother adventure that's very difficult. A lot of laws in a lot of states, surprisingly, a lot of, not laws necessarily, but when you set a precedence in a case, there are a lot of states that a precedence has already been set that says if he deleted the file or it was in unallocated space, that does not constitute possession. That he did attempt to delete it. Because under certain laws, like Georgia state law, if you have one child porn picture, you're on a website and you download something by accident, it's a child porn picture, and you delete that one, then you're okay. That's not against the law. But you have 3, that's against the law. So those are the kind of things that start to be a problem. So if you deleted it, are you in possession of it? I mean, if you're a specialist and you have tools, like how many people you know could not recover a single file from their hard drive? A lot of the other people can't use any tools and recover a single file from their hard drive. They don't know what they're doing. So if they're not a professional, they don't have those skill levels, then they don't have the skill to go reacquire the picture. They don't constitute possession. Does that make sense? So we've had a couple of cases like that in Georgia. We've had a couple of cases in other states, but it's about possession. Do you knowingly possess it? And that's the other part. How do you knowingly possess it? Can you always prove you did not know it?
Is it quantity of rate?
It depends on, so we have federal and we have state laws. Different states have different quantities, but federal law supersedes most of them, and 3 is federal. So typically when you're in federal, if you've got 3, then you're in that category. In Georgia, typically 1, you're okay. But once you got 2, then that's a problem. So, but they can arrest you. They can still charge you. It's pretty, I mean, and they'll do something like a movie. Every frame of the movie they'll count. So every frame, everything they call a frame in the movie, they'll say, oh, well, he has more than 600. He has a video and it has more than 600, and they'll count every frame as a separate picture. So, huh?
Technically it is.
Yeah, technically it is. That's the problem, right? That's the argument. Like,
I only watch 1/3 of the movie, that's 200 only.
right? Yeah, but you'll be in jail for a long, long time. You'll be in jail for a long, long time. We not see you a long, long time. So anyway,
We'll love you for a long, long time.
right? Yeah, while you're there. So recovery options. So this is kind of like, this looks a lot different to you guys now than it did probably on Monday when you saw this, right? Now you're on the whole other side, and you're like, it's like looking back, you're Mark Twain looking at the river. I can see now the sandbars, and now I can no longer see the beauty of the ocean, right?
That was super deep, Sean.
Huh?
Super deep, Scott. That's the most deep literary reference I've ever heard at a training center.
Right, awesome. Yeah, well, so as you can see from this standpoint, this is a lot It's awesome. Isn't this easy? This is the easiest thing you've ever done in your whole life, isn't it?
Super leveled right there.
Right? I know. Done. Done. Lined up.
Boom, right?
I know, and this is why people email me and go, "I saw your video on how to do, a head replacement. Can you? It should be easy."
Look at that.
I know. I'm awesome. And then when I do a single one,
Pushed it in, it went right in.
right? Like, we're done. Like, yeah, I usually move it down here.
Presentation purposes only.
Yeah, I know. This is like when you have animators working for you and you're doing stuff, you're like, listen, to get that right, it's going to be $10,000. This is what I do for a hot swap. So hot swap, you're actually moving the board while it's live from one drive to the other. And then you just start copying. That's all you're going to do. Now, solid state, thumb drives, you can do this. I've done this. This is a pretty common thing to do. You'll remove off your memory stick, your memory from the chip, and you'll move it to another one. So,
Infrared.
huh? Right, it's pretty easy with infrared, but trust me when I say, don't start at the high temperatures. Start at a low temperature. Start at like 140.
What was the magic clamping thing? Where do I buy
That was
magic
my
clamp things?
that was my super soldering tool, which at the time I did not use infrared. And infrared's pretty close to that at this point, right? You just sit it on there, you hit it with some light, and there it is. Right, I had a super secret clampy soldering gun.
So most thumb drives are going to be USB 2. You said USB 3. Now the
There's a protocol. Yeah, there's a controller protocol.
the controller's on the chip.
What was that?
The amount of wattage with USB 3.
Oh yeah, right. Your wires increase. Yes. So
No, but the controller's on the board now.
yes, and most chips, most NAND chips now have an embedded controller, and that's starting to be a real problem because the controller's embedded and it's not a separate chip. So now it's all its own intelligence altogether. All it is just stuck on the board, and that's where it starts to become monolithic, is what we're talking about. So it becomes very difficult. But these are TSOP 48. So these are your standard. I can put these in a reader, read these, do whatever. Still, most thumb drives are made this way. And then there's a controller chip. In a lot of cases, this is the encryption chip. So there's actually some encryption key here, or there's one on the other side that's a little Intego chip or something like that on the other side. So you got to take those. Yeah.
What do you do with the monolith chips that you get?
They're painful. They're the most painful. That's why I said you don't have any control now, because you can't you can't get to monolithic chips. Monolithic chips are where they've combined the processor and the memory into the same chip, and now it's one chip that's just like a square that you can't get to.
And then when it goes wrong,
Right, and then when it goes wrong, you can't read anything, can't do anything, can't talk to it. And in a lot of them, you just can't even get to them. Like, you just can't even get, they're epoxied, and you can't get to where the chips are. So, no, it's a nightmare from that standpoint. But, I mean, Resolute has got some not so good solutions, but it'll work. I mean, right. But these are still, you can still put these in a TSOP reader and read these. And I solder these all day long. This is a normal thing, but I would normally be repairing this most of the time, or something that went wrong right here. You can sit there with a meter. They're not that complicated, a board, so you can usually figure out what's wrong with them. Or get another one just like it, take these 3 chips off and resolder them, and that'll be fine. Yeah, there'll be either 2, there'll either be this one, or this one, and there'll be 1 chip on the other side.
Scott, can you tell me, so I get why, like, on an Xbox, they put epoxy on certain chips. I completely understand that. But
Why they put a what on certain chips?
so they'll put, like, epoxy over certain chips.
Yeah,
from
right.
replacing them. I get that. But, like, on a thumb drive, why sometimes do they cover them in epoxy?
Security for recovery.
A year.
No, they're purposely trying to stop people from recovering them. If they epoxy the chip, in order to get to the chip, then you've got to do disassemble. Like, for instance, Apple puts epoxy on a lot of their chips because they don't want anybody taking chips off the board or going and reverse engineering or discovering anything. So it causes a huge problem when you're trying to get the epoxy off of them. And that was the first trick that Iron Key. Remember, you guys know what Iron Key is? They're a thumb drive manufacturer that their chip will destroy itself. They have a built-in encryption key, and if you type your password 10 times, it destroys the key and destroys it in the chip, and it's epoxied. The entire thumb drive is epoxied. So it's the most secure thumb drive that there is. So, and you have a choice. I mean, if you want to store a backup of your password on their server, they'll do that, because once you have no password, it's over. And once it kills it, if you do the 10th time, it's unrecoverable from then on, forever. So they epoxy them to stop people from reverse engineering or figuring them out or getting the key off of them or doing anything like that. So, but this is pretty much repair. Most of the time you can repair a thumb drive. You can figure those out. It's the solid state drive. This is what is So most of the time on solid state drives, I'm looking for something broken. I'm looking for a capacitor, a resistor, a TVS, something that's broken, and I'm replacing it and doing that. That is plausible, and that's where you should spend most of your time if you're going to do solid state, is sitting there with a meter trying to figure out. But you know what you need? Another one. You need one to compare it to. So you've got to go find a donor that you can compare stuff to in the hopes that you can figure out what's wrong with it so you can repair it. Because I will tell you, this, I have done it. I have done it. I've spent time doing it. This is your nightmare. I will never do this again. I destroyed thousands of dollars of drives doing that.
Get it working?
Yeah, I got one working. After destroying several $2,000, $1,000 drives back in the day, I finally got it working. But there's no way I'd try this anymore. The chances of success are slim to none. What?
Frame somewhere.
No, I have a pile. I have a whole box. I still have all this, all the research, all the work I've done, all the chips. I still have a box that has everything in it. But that's the problem. The problem is the value of doing that for a consumer. I wasn't doing it to recover it for a client. I was doing it to learn it to see if it was possible. So I destroyed thousands, just like I did. Like basically what happened was, you know, when I learned to do hard drives, I did 12. I sat down at a table and I did 12 until I got one to work. And that's how I learned how to do hard drives back in 2000. When 2006, 2007 rolls around and starts coming out with solid state, I'm like, I'm going to do the same thing. So I went and I bought. First, I just bought them one at a time. I bought one at a time. I destroyed them. And then I bought another one and destroyed it. And eventually you get somewhere around $3,000 and you're like, this probably isn't the best choice. This probably isn't the best way to go. So I got one working and that was it. And then I stopped. From then on, I'm always repairing something. I focus on repair. And this is where forensics is divided from data recovery. In forensics, you're trying to get stuff back you can't get back. In data recovery, you're trying to get stuff back that your client will help you get back or that you can repair. Those are two different worlds from that standpoint. So they do cross over some, but that ultimately is it. So that's pretty much what it is, and and then this is my Matrix hard drive. When the Matrix came out, I was like, it'd be neat if we made like a Matrix hard drive. So I made two of them, and so there's one that's in color and one that's in black and white, and then it
Disco music in there.
right? Yeah, it really should just be the Matrix theme though. It should just really be. So anyway, so this was my video of that. So that is all I have for you guys. That was an amazing week. I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much. And feel free to email me, do whatever, and then after I shut the machine down, I'll copy the videos, and you guys can start copying them. And then from then on, just email, do whatever. Somebody help me put some boxes in the car. All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Can I take a picture with you?
Okay.